Right, folks, welcome to Not Another Whiskey Podcast. We've got some superstar whiskey entrepreneurs in the house today. Very good friends of Daz and I, Tristan, Stephenson, and Tom Aske. Gents, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Mitch and Daz. Pleasure to be here.
I like the delay there, boys. It was kind of like, oh, we're on the show. What's going on here?
I was thinking Tom was going to say thank you first, or whether it was me. And as you can see, we just almost interrupted each other then. So that's how in tune with one another we are these days.
The joys of Zoom, right? It's always hard on Zoom. So guys who are listening, if you haven't heard of Tristan and Tom yet, absolute superstars. Tristan is a well-accomplished author now, I'd say, right, Tristan? How many books we got going on? 8?
8, soon to be 9. Yeah.
Soon to be 9, mate. Absolutely amazing. Unbelievable bartenders, won several competitions, still are judges within competitions as well. Used to be brand ambassadors, along with Daz and I, back in our Diageo days. Owners of some of the most famous bars round about London. So I think you guys are now on your, let me do the maths on this, 7th bar, maybe? Am I right in saying that?
I think it might be a little bit more than that, but it's difficult to say. Some of them didn't last very long. So it's debatable whether they even count, but I think it's more like 9 or 10, isn't it, Tom?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, it must be. I think it must be, yeah. Like you say, we tend to open and close them pretty rapidly. So
which is a good way to be. Which is a good way to be.
Lost count.
But I mean, let's talk about what you have right now. I mean, the big one that you guys have that is absolutely cranking is Black Rock, right? Let's talk about Black Rock for a second. Anyone who hasn't been to Black Rock, explain exactly what it is.
Well, I mean, Black Rock, basically, as you've said, it's a whiskey bar. It's primarily whiskey focused. In fact, it's almost exclusively whiskey focused, really, with a small small selection of beers to go alongside it. And we really set it up effectively to simplify the category, or to be like a gateway to the category of whiskey, to be honest. And, you know, as you were talking about, going back to the days where we all worked at Diageo, and you could see that, you know, there was an increasing interest in whiskey, but there was also a lot of barriers to getting into it for new consumers and people that want to start their journey. You know, and all the traditional ones that we know about now, you know, understanding flavor, price is always a tricky one in traditional bars. You know, the sort of stereotypes that go around with whiskey bars, you know, the sort of tartan, bagpipe, log fire, very sort of traditional Scottish.
Careful, he's Scottish, remember.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
I'll come down there in a heartbeat and mess you up.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, we just wanted to approach it in a different way. You know, take all these barrels and try and break them down, really. You know, and you know, starting mainly with focusing on flavour and how the whiskies were presented in the bar, to simplify, you know, what they actually taste like for people. And in, you know, go on, Tris.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was the main focus, really. It was how do we almost make the whiskey buying process easier for consumers. And it wasn't just for people that don't know anything about whiskey, but even, you know, connoisseurs, people like yourself, Mitch. You know, you're certainly one of the people we thought about when we were designing Black Rock. what would Mitch do? And you, Daz, like if they came in, what would their experience be? Because if you think about what a traditional whiskey bar looks like, it tends to just be a wall of bottles, and it's quite intimidating, even when you know what you're doing around that wall of bottles, right? It's separated by country, region, distillery, typically. But what use is that other than a sort of, you know, decent way to stock take? You know, oh, cool, I've got all my Highland Parks in one place. That's easy to count up. You know, it's no use to the consumer whatsoever. So you require a bartender who's really knowledgeable and very personable in order to assist the customer in deciding what it is they want to drink. And we just thought that the arrangement of whiskey in a bar can work a lot harder to aid the consumer. And so there are a few things that we do with Black Rock that sort of challenge convention, but I think the main one is separating whiskey by flavor and arranging it into 6 different flavor groups: smoke, sweet, spice, fruity, fragrance, and balance.
That's one of the things that really stuck out with me, that cabinet that you have that explains everything really well. The other thing that's stuck in my memory on my first visit was the bartender who made me a Iron Brew Reduction Talisker cocktail. And the third thing was that amazing table that you guys have where you serve your house whiskey. Let's chat about that for a second before we move on to Whiskyme, which I know you guys are focusing on right now, and that's what this whole episode is around. So let's talk about this big tree trunk you have essentially sitting in the middle of the bar at Blackrock.
Yeah, well, there's one thing for sure, that it's never leaving that property, even if we have to at some point. I can tell you that much. I think it weighs about it's like 2.5 tons. But I mean, the thing about the table was that it served many different purposes for us in what our objective was, to try and educate people about whiskey and simplify it. And I mean, the idea primarily came out of a collaboration with a guy called Rob Sumner, who runs a company now called Soak. And we'd been doing some work with him on some other projects, and we obviously mentioned that we're opening Blackrock, and we started discussing the potential for certain certain furniture or things that would showcase whiskey, and collaboratively came up with the idea of having this English oak tree as the centerpiece within the bar, because as you know, you've been there, such a small space that you've got to really manage effectively the capacity, and it ticked loads of boxes by having this centerpiece that we could get 20 different people sat around. It acted as a communal table, meaning that people, obviously pre-COVID, would communicate with each other out of separate groups of people around whiskey, because they were all quite closely sat together. And the other thing was, really to just go, well, actually, when we talk about aging whiskey, really focusing on a sort of novice perspective, really, what does it actually even mean? What is whiskey actually aged in, or often aged in? And to have a huge 20-foot long oak tree kind of symbolized, well, actually, yeah, it's aged in oak. And the two channels that we've got, for anyone that isn't familiar with Blackrock, we've basically got 2 channels carved into the table that run the length of them, one of which is lined with American oak, or charred American oak, and the other lined with European oak, French oak. And so, again, it just showcases, so, well, actually, what's the difference between these 2 different materials that are used to age whiskey, and to have a physical example of it in front of guests as they're sat there. And of course, obviously it looks beautiful. And secondly, pretty much everybody that goes in there will try something out of that table, just because of the very nature of how stunning it is as a centerpiece,
I've seen the pictures of you guys pouring all the whiskey into that as well. It's brilliant to see.
The other thing that I think we'd both admit to about the table is that it was somewhat of a lure to get people in as well. It was probably the most photogenic element of the bar design, and it was, especially at the time of opening, really talked about a lot, and it got people into the bar who had no interest in whiskey whatsoever. But of course, once we got them in, we could then kind of throw at them everything else that we'd done, really, in order to try and promote whiskey and its flavor and its diversity and its mixability and all that sort of stuff, and then hopefully convert some people while they were there. So yeah, it was to some extent this kind of like centerpiece or stooge or something that was there to just kind of attract people, anyone.
Yeah,
and now you guys are taking over the world, right? I mean, that's 2 of them in London, and you just opened up Shanghai, or it's about to open up.
Yeah.
Oh, it did open up.
It's open. Yeah, it's open. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get out there because of COVID restrictions. But yeah, no, I mean, we've had ups and downs, really. I mean, I think I mentioned to you before, Mitch, we had to close the site in Bristol during COVID. We had a Blackrock in Bristol, which we couldn't keep hold of. But on the flip side, we managed to open another Blackrock over at East India Docks, over near Canary Wharf. And in the process of that, yeah, we were discussing with our partners in China, we were discussing this with them way before COVID. I think probably going back to like 2018, we were having first discussions, and it was all set up and ready to go, and then effectively was put on a back burner because of what happened with COVID for the best part of 2 years, and just got reinvigorated, probably 6 to 8 months ago. And yeah, we've actually got a multi-site license deal, basically partnership to open 6 sites in the next 5 years in China with our partners. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously incredibly exciting. I'm just looking forward to being able to get over there and actually enjoy it and see it.
Glen Turret just got awarded their Michelin star.
Saw that. It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. Really cool. And one of the things that always bugged me about distilleries was they're the worst places to go for drinks most of the time. They've never got good bars. They're just not set up for it. Do you know what I mean? Has a distillery ever come to you and said, guys, come and open a Black Rock at our distillery?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
No, they haven't, but it's a good idea.
Let's not put this in the podcast.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, though. I mean, I think it's improved a lot, has changed. And actually, if you go to distillery bars in the US, they know how to open a distillery bar. Like, because I guess because they're just like, they really like drinking over there. Mind you, Scottish people like drinking. But distillery bars in the UK on the whole are way overlit. They're sort of like it's like what a designer thinks a bar should look like in the future. That's what they tend to look like.
Yeah,
you know.
And even the Johnny Walker experience, I like it. I've been up. It's great, but it looks exactly like a designer has designed it and has no idea how to create an atmosphere. Do you know what I mean?
I think part of I mean, I might be wrong here, but I'd imagine that part of the issue with it is that within distilleries, it's a very different drinking experience, isn't it? Or a very different drinking occasion to a bar specifically. In that, to my knowledge at least, I don't believe that even the bars within distilleries, for example, will be staying open in the evenings to accommodate guests, which they should really. I mean, if you think about, God, you think about someone like Speyside alone or certain parts of Speyside, if each of those distilleries actually had a functioning bar in them that opened past 5 or 6 o'clock, you know, I think it would do wonders generally for sort of the tourism around, you know, people actually just going out and drinking within the distillery bars.
What about somewhere like Oban, you know, where it's right in the middle of the village? The village is literally,
I think, isn't it?
Named after the distillery, right? So it's like somewhere like that would work.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of the US distilleries have got great bars, because they tend to be in like urban areas, right? And so it's a place you can legitimately go out to and actually drink all evening and then go back, get a taxi back home. Whereas, of course, in Scotland, most of the distilleries are pretty remote, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think what we've established from this is you guys aren't going to open a Black Rock in Speyside in a distillery. Is that right?
You know,
I'd be all down. I'd be totally down for that, since I go up there all the time.
We saw. I think it was recently that the Fiddick side was back for sale again, and Tristan did send jokingly, I'm assuming jokingly, that imagine a Black Rock there, which obviously would go completely against what the Fiddick side is, but the concept of having a Black Rock in, you know, like the home of Scotch whiskey would be, you know, been interesting.
All right, so let's move away from the bars for a second. Let's get on to what we're chatting about on this episode, which is whiskey subscriptions and Whiskyme with you guys, which has been an incredibly successful concept. I mean, I've seen this from you guys starting this up, from the vending machines that you had with it, which is absolutely insane to see. And then the most incredible thing was one night sitting in my house watching you guys on Dragon's Den get all 4 dragons on board for Whiskyme, which is, if anyone hasn't seen this before, go back and watch that episode. Let's talk about exactly what Whiskyme is.
Wait. No. We got 3 dragons.
I thought you got 4.
No, 3. I mean, yeah, we could just go with 4. Should we just go with that?
Go with 4.
That's a good headline. That's a great headline. Yeah.
No, we got 3, which doesn't happen very often. It has to be said, but we're not the first.
Tristan, have you not learned from your ambassador days? Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story, right? Yeah. All right, we'll edit that out now. We probably won't, because I can't be arsed.
Don't worry about it. Leave it in.
Let's chat about Whiskyme, guys. How did this whole idea come around?
Well, it was off the back of Black Rock, for sure. And I mean, Tom was the one that was really pushing it to begin with. I think he was the one, like, you know, I really think there's an at-home opportunity. And I think he'd been banging on about it for a good year or 2 before we made any kind of decision to push it forward. And even when we did, it was mostly Tom that was pushing it forward. It has to be said. So kudos to him.
To be honest, the main one of the biggest reasons was because there were a couple of things that happened really which put on the map for me that subscription models were coming back in a big way across the board. And you've seen it, you see it across everything now, from dog food to, fruit and vegetables, everything you can subscribe to. But one of the biggest things was that it was the acquisition of $1 Shave Club for £1 billion in cash by Unilever. And, a company that was sending out razors on a monthly basis was bought by this huge organization for such an astronomical amount of money. That was like, God, something's shifting here. And I think the way that people are, the way that people are purchasing nowadays is so different, I think, and is moving quite rapidly. Now, as we know, subscriptions have been around for decades, from milk deliveries to magazines. But it just kind of made me think, well, actually, we should probably get on this now. And we weren't the first either. There were obviously, I think Craft Gin Club were there and doing their thing, but it just made sense. And a bit, I do tend to talk a lot, so stop me at any point. But I think the biggest point of difference for us was where we positioned it. We positioned it at such an accessible price point, but were able to offer such amazing whiskey, basically because of the packaging, because of the pouch, which compared to, a lot of our competitors, even now, who are sending in glass, to send in glass means that you've got to put it into some quite robust outer packaging, which then changes the shipping cost from 90 pence to £3.90. And all of a sudden, your membership has to cost you 20 quid a month or 30 quid a month versus £7.95. And so we actually just stumbled across the packaging and all of the sort of costs.
It was my idea.
Yeah, well, yeah. We actually we found
you stumbled across it. I formulated it very cleverly over a period of weeks and months.
Yeah, I created the master plan.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
I think we might have a like work wife fight live on the podcast.
No, I can have that one. But yeah, it was that was that really. It was a case of going, right, let's get whiskey into people's homes in a very affordable way. And again, we priced it specifically alongside the same price as the Netflix subscription because it just felt like the right sort of level that, don't get me wrong, not everybody can afford $7.95 a month, but a lot of people can. And it's an amount of money that we thought would entice a lot of people to at least try it if they have any interest in whiskey at all, versus a commitment of $29.99 a month, or even more. Some subscriptions it takes a bit more thought, and so we thought, right, we'll go in at $7.95, which will allow us to basically send our members whiskies that normally retail anywhere from £50 upwards a bottle, which again was the perfect price point to just be uncomfortable enough for certain people to take a risk on a bottle. When you go into a whiskey shop and you go, right, well, if I spend 50 quid on this and I don't like it, that's it's not 20 quid, is it? It just feels different. But yeah. we've sent whiskies. We sent out Glenfarclas 25 last year, which was retailing at the time over 100 quid a bottle.
Also that price point, like sort of around 50 plus, not to take away anything from the whiskies that you find in supermarkets, because you can certainly find great whiskies in supermarkets, but it tended to put us above that supermarket level. And that meant that people are receiving whiskies that they're not necessarily familiar with unless they visit whiskey shops, wine shops, or online whiskey retailers. And so that meant the whole sort of club experience felt that little bit more exclusive. You're getting introduced to stuff that's not normal, not normal. It's not that it's not normal. It's that it's not usual, typical.
Yeah, that I kind of always sort of said to people, it's more like the B-sides, it's your... Yeah, that is not the first whiskey that anyone's going to buy. Usually it'll be something that you would have to discover. Right, quick fire question, just while we're talking about subscriptions, right? What's the shittest subscription you reckon you've ever had?
I haven't actually had that many subscriptions. The only ones I think that I've actually subscribed to, I had a tea subscription for a while.
That's a good one.
Yeah, which was... That
sounds good.
Yeah, which it was pretty good. It was pretty good. But I just sort of, I don't know, I just kind of got a bit bored with it. I didn't really have that much of a passion for it, where I was like, well, yeah.
Why the hell did you fucking subscribe to it then?
Well, at the time that I subscribed, I was doing some, it was at a time when I was doing some work for Marriott, and we were developing stuff around tea, and I got an interest in it through visiting newbie teas. in London. Anyway,
Right, Tom, this is a really shit story. Tristan, what's your worst?
Yeah.
Well, do you know what? I haven't had a bad product as such on a subscription, but one of the worst subscription experiences I had was I subscribed to New Scientist magazine because I like science.
You did.
And by the way, it's a great magazine. Like, it's full of incredibly interesting stuff. The one problem is they send you a new magazine every week. Okay. And there's just no way you can consume it unless you're retired. You don't stand a chance of being able to consume it all because it's like reading a book in a week. And these fucking things are just stacking up. And I was like, Jesus. And it became extremely stressful because I was like, I've read like 2 pages of that one, 0 of that. And I've got 3 more that I haven't even unwrapped from the fucking packaging. And so I unsubscribed.
When you started off Whiskyme, right? You started in these plastic pouches. I know whiskey drinkers. There must have been some kind of pushback on that. What was the best story from that?
None.
Bollocks.
Everyone loved it.
Everyone embraced it.
Next question.
No, I mean, the thing was for us, it meant that people were talking about it, and I think the tricky thing is, of course, the sustainability angle, and from one side, but also, I guess whatever you want to call whiskey purists who didn't like to see specifically single malt whiskey in pouches, mainly just because it had never been done before. And the fact of the matter was that it doesn't affect the flavour of the whiskey. It's just a very neat, inexpensive way of transporting it, and it got people talking, which is what we needed for a new company that basically had no traction, no money, and no members at the time. So we ended up on like a Fox News affiliate channel in the States just because of the pouch, because nobody had seen whiskey put in pouches before. But no, we took a bit of a hammering, and we still do, to be honest with you. Like, even now, when we're doing, some of our advertising that we do, obviously paid advertising and stuff, which can be, seen by a fair few people. Obviously, we still get comments from people that are like, it's disgusting, whiskey shouldn't be in a pouch, but all the information's there to see. It's just that people don't tend to want to have to read up or understand. They would much rather make passing comment without fully understanding A, the sustainability angle, B, the fact that it's flavour inert, and all of the positive reasons why we do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
And you guys are mixing up the category as well, which is great. So
there's the type of consumer that believes whiskey should be in sort of super premium packaging all the time and all that kind of thing. And that really it kind of goes against the whole philosophy in that does it taste good? What does it taste like? Do you enjoy it? And the packaging shouldn't really factor into that too much, as long as it's, not busted or broken or looks, crap. And then the final thing is the material and the sustainability side of it. And to that, there's a couple of things. First of all, a lot of glass bottles get shipped in bubble wrap, which is still plastic, or huge amounts of cardboard and the glass and the plastic lids. And the second thing is that we recycle the pouches and we reward our members for sending them back to us. So we just tell all of our members, every 12 pouches you collect, send them back to us, which is going to cost you, the price of a stamp. And we will send you a free pouch of whiskey to reward you. And then we send them on for recycling. So it can be entirely guilt-free, and all the benefit of that lightweight, envelope-friendly packaging that goes straight through your door. And, the other thing is, because it fits through the letterbox, you don't have to go to the Royal Mail collection office or whatever on a fucking Saturday to collect your 1 pouch of whiskey. This one goes straight to the letterbox, and that that's a wonderful thing in the world we live in now, where you're constantly stressing about, has this thing been delivered, where have they left it, is it at the bloody delivery routing office? Rant over.
That's true. No, but like you say that, I mean, ultimately, right, the priority is flavour. It should be, and it's as simple as that, shouldn't it? Yeah. Less concerned about what you're receiving it in, more concerned about actually, do I enjoy it? Is the whole point, isn't it? Like we said.
And actually, I have a pouch of Macallan from our first ever drop. We might have pulled a couple of favors for that.
I was going to bring that up. We got in trouble for that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. We got in trouble for that.
I didn't. I didn't.
No, you didn't. You should have been the one that got in trouble.
What's funny about it was the very first one. it was a bit of a grey area, it seemed afterwards, as to whether we were actually allowed to do it. And B, it was the only one where we were actually allowed to fly a drone around the still house, which was bizarre.
Well, the funny thing was
mental.
It would have been, honestly, it would have been one of the very last tours of the old Macallan distillery. And the reason why we got away with it is because I was leaving, and we had special permission. And then Macallan was great back then, because the guys, the distillery team, Russell Anderson and Bob Delgarno was the whiskey maker. These guys were fabulous. You know, they were always brilliant with me. And we kind of didn't get proper permission, but we got some form of permission that was required.
Do you remember we sat in that office for about an hour going over forms and shit like that? And then after it was all signed and everyone was happy, we then went and flew a freaking drone under the line arms in the still house with no supervision other than you, Daz.
Well, here's the thing, right? Because it was strange, wasn't it? It was like a Bond movie. Like, as soon as we went into the still house, people just started to disappear.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now? Do you know what I mean?
So let me ask you this. So going back to the Dragon's Den thing, since that happened, have you had a lot more distilleries approaching you wanting to get into Whiskyme?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's completely changed the entire business in many ways, in a lot of ways, really. I mean, there was a growing acceptance of repackaging in pouch from a lot of distilleries, but it was really sort of it turned everything on its head from there. I mean, we've managed to book up the entirety of 2022 already, for example, and we've got a backlog of probably another 15 or 18 distilleries that want to feature that I'm putting off, basically got to put off until 2023. So, you know, it's picked up some pace. And so, off the back of that, we got a lot of emails from distilleries. And the other thing about that was that at the exact same time as launching, at the exact same time as being on Dragon's Den, we also launched a separate SKU, which was for world whiskey as well. So prior to that, we only had one product that we sent out, which was single malt Scotch. That was it. And so it opened a huge amount of doors to broaden into world whiskies. And so, yeah, we've had emails from tons of people, tons of distilleries.
Question for both of you guys. We put on Instagram that we're going to be chatting with you guys tonight. And does anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask? And there was a guy called Peter Jones who replied, and he said, what's your favorite dragon to work with? So that was his, I don't know who Peter is, but he asked that question.
Peter would never have asked that question because he knows how much we work with him.
Yeah, I think they all bring something different. If I'm being honest with you, the sort of direct contact with Peter Jones is probably the least, and I'd imagine obviously he's got still got TV commitments and a lot on. I think the most proactive is probably Deborah, I'd say, really, who is I guess the one dragon where I would feel comfortable actually just picking up the phone, at any point and having a conversation or a chat or asking questions, and she's very proactive as well in feedback. So no, I think they all bring something new. I mean, Tej obviously has got an absolutely enormous company that is shipping worldwide. So there's an element of that around the expertise in sort of marketing, really, and understanding the sort of best methods to get to the right audiences. But no, I think Deborah's probably been the most proactive so far.
The thing about Deborah is that she she gave up all of her sort of main business interests, I think, a few years ago. So all she does now is work with her investments through Dragon's Den. So she's basically like a professional angel investor. Whereas, of course, well, Peter, first of all, I believe he's invested in 140 plus companies through Dragon's Den. So you can't really expect him to be interactive day to day with each of those companies. He has a whole team of people.
I'm amazed that he asked that question on Instagram.
Yeah, I know.
How does he have the time?
He's got more free time than I thought, and that's good of him to.
Yeah, he might actually jump in, to be honest.
Yeah. Should we call him now?
Yeah.
Should we get him on live?
Yeah. Tom, Tristan, so good to see you boys. Great to hear everything's going so well. on Whiskyme, and also good to get an update on Black Rock as well, mate. And the Shanghai story is a cool one, and I'll hear more about it when I see you boys in a few weeks, I'm sure. So, what about Whiskyme then? Tell the listeners what they need to know. Also, Chin Mitch, because he's not got a subscription. Solid mate, him, eh? I don't either, actually. Mine ran out last year.
What are we doing on this podcast? What do we get, Tom? Why do you want to come on this podcast?
I don't know. Maybe probably get half a lager when we see him next.
And it'll be warm as well.
Yeah, it'll be warm. Yeah, exactly. So, Whiskyme, $7.95 a month. Go check it out. www.whisky-me.com. Drams delivered through your door on a monthly schedule. Single malt Scotch whiskey and world whiskey.
There you go, Mitch. You know what to get me for Christmas, pal?
Right, and you can see why Tom crushed it on that Dragon's Den now.
So good to see you, boys. We'll catch up
you
soon.
too, man. Take care.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
being on the
Thanks for
show.
having us on.